Oh God, in the last video I said life was generally getting better in the last 50 years and people were not happy. On YouTube, normally people don't click the dislike button, right? You either like something or you ignore it. But my last one got quite a few dislikes. A lot of people just can't swallow the idea that the past administrations actually did anything good. I'm worried about this anti-everything crowd because, I have a feeling that even after they realize how disastrous the Trump administration is, they still won't vote for the Democrats. And as a result, we will just end up with a Trump monarchy. It's a very real possibility. These people's anti-everything sentiment is so strong that they either refuse the possibility that things can get better or they rely on some completely delusional idea other than elections, which I will talk about in a minute. Such a mindset definitely involves some cognitive dissonance. For example, if you're angry about Trump defunding science, shouldn't you at least recognize the past administration's achievement in funding science, right? Why are you angry if there wasn't any achievement to protect? The US universities have been dominating scientific research by a large margin for a long time. But where's people's appreciation for that policy's success? I've never seen it once on social media. And people rightfully condemn Trump's concentration camps. Of course, anyone with a fucking heart should do that. But I rarely see people say anything about the past administration's compliance with due process and court orders. For a federal government that powerful, that self-constraint was pretty impressive, right? And of course, people condemn the cancellation of foreign aid, the defunding of Medicaid, and the destruction of free trade, etc., etc. But they still refuse to give anyone credit for creating those things in the first place. Those goodies don't just fall from the sky, right? Someone made them possible. Can we at least acknowledge that? I have very little illusion about the integrity of politicians, but still, they're not all bad guys. Why can't you just be a little more lenient and give the relatively good ones a break? Is it because being cynical is a path of least resistance on social media? Or is it peer pressure or what? I don't get it. I showed this map a few times. Just look at this crazy shit in the past. Especially the Mongolian Empire and the Russian Empire. China also expanded a lot in Qing Dynasty and wiped out quite a few indigenous groups. And the Ottoman Empire. And of course, you all know about the European colonial wars. Greedy as hell. That was the norm in the past. Free for all, grab what you can, kill whoever in the way. Humans were just like that. But in the last 70 years, how many countries are still doing this on a large scale? Pretty close to zero. Saddam Hussein marched into Kuwait, but was only able to stay there for like a few months. Russia is still trying, old habits die hard, but not very successful either. The NATO deterrence of territorial wars was just such a great achievement in my view, that it fundamentally changed the human behavior. It created this relaxed, peacetime civilization that we as a species had never experienced before. If a 19th century guy time travels here and realizes how many countries are not having wars, they'll never want to leave. I'm not talking about other modern perks like, K-pop, but just the rareness of war alone will make that guy never want to go back. We're just that lucky. I know war is still bloody when it does happen, but its low likelihood is a fucking miracle. I know what you're gonna say next because I've had this conversation over and over again. Some of you will say the American empire doesn't need territories anymore because it's robbing other countries with capital. Well, if that were the case, the GDP growth wouldn't be 2%, guys. If you can rob people for free, why are the growth rates so moderate? Some European countries are like under 1% all the time. They must be pretty bad at robbing. And why are these poor countries growing so fast if they're being robbed? And why do you assume they allow themselves to be robbed? These robbery arguments imply that people in the global south just don't have agency. They don't know how to choose business partners. Like trade is this mysterious game that only Westerners know how to play. And other countries just sit there and get scammed. No. This is the GDP growth map from last year. I don't have the earlier map, but I'm pretty sure the recent decades are the only time period where almost the whole world is growing. Can you just take a minute and appreciate how difficult it was to achieve something like this? Just look at this. Ask yourself if you would be able to maintain such a reliable world trade system if you were the US president. But some folks are like, no, I'm not listening. They're all bad. Just shut up. And now guess what? Because you don't vote, you end up getting a president who plays godfather with the world economy and threatens to invade Denmark. And millions will die because of the foreign aid cuts. How does that feel? Finally, I need to talk about this. Some folks are like, we don't vote for these fuckers because we want to create a whole new system. I feel like it's too mean to ask them how, because of course they don't know how. Nobody knows how. Even passing a bill is hard enough, let alone having a revolution. But I feel I should at least ask them, what new system? That's not too much to ask, right? This person says the only solution is democratic socialism. So I was like, okay, but which countries qualify as democratic socialist? And he's like, none. This is at least the third person that gave me the same answer. None. Zero. So anything human societies have tried so far is not good enough for them. That just sounds hopeless. I'm not saying inventing a new system is impossible, but come on. This is like the social science equivalent of some high schoolers trying to prove the Goldbach conjecture. And another type of comments is even sadder. This guy identifies as a communist. So I asked him how they're gonna solve the world's problems if their revolution succeeds. He's like, we will use the scientific method to abolish class, just as Lenin, Mao, Ho Chi Minh, and others who came before us. I don't mean to rain on your parade, but the scientific method of Mao, do you know what the guy did? He mobilized the whole country to kill sparrows, just because he believed they stole grains. That science sounds like RFK Jr. on steroid. At least 200 million sparrows were killed. Some people say 2 billion. Okay, which partly caused the famine a year later because the grasshoppers had a field day without those sparrows. And he also mobilized the whole country to make steel in their backyards using homemade furnaces. People had to cut down the forests to feed those furnaces. The scientific method is not that easy, guys. You can't do science without data. If your revolutionary leaders never read any empirical studies in their lives, you really shouldn't trust them with your country. Doesn't matter what ism they hold. Okay, left or right, doesn't matter. You need experts who devote their whole lives into the painful world of data and formulas. So I'm not asking you to vote for the Democrats because of ideology. I'm asking you to vote for them because they have a track record of respecting science. They're humble enough to delegate their power to real experts. They make mistakes and then they correct them when more data kick in. What else can we hope for?